welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Mindy and this is See Mindy Mom, and today I am sharing with you something that has been requested a lot, and that is how I make my homemade seasoning mixes. So stay tuned. All right, you guys, if you have watched my What I Eat in a Day videos, my recipe share videos, if you've seen the way that I feed my family, you've often heard me talk about different seasoning mixes that I use in my cooking. Primarily ranch seasoning, taco seasoning, and spaghetti seasoning. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up with these in the household, these little seasoning packets, and my mom used these in our sauces and in our soups and stews and in our recipes, and I did too until a couple of years ago whenever I discovered that you can actually make these things at home, probably with spices and seasonings that you already have on hand. Not only is making my own seasoning mixes more economical because ounce for ounce and pound for pound, it tends to be less expensive whenever we are making these from scratch. It allows me to control exactly what's going into these mixes so I can make adjustments according to our personal tastes and preferences. So if I want to, I can reduce the amount of salt, I can eliminate the sugar, and of course, whenever I'm making these just from simple seasonings and ingredients that I have at home, there aren't gonna be a lot of those chemical additives and preservatives that are in the packet mixes. Now let me tell you guys that occasionally I still need these in my life, okay? And if this is a convenience that you need in order to make meals for your family, you are getting no judgment from me. I've just had a lot of questions in the comments in my videos over the past several months of how I make these particular mixes, so I thought I would go ahead and show you guys. Now, I will leave some links in the description box below to similar recipes. I'm just going to show you how I make these mixes according to our tastes. I might have a little bit more garlic powder than you would like in your seasoning mix, or perhaps you like yours less or more spicy. I have just played around with these recipes several times and I kind of have it the way that we like it, but of course you can make adjustments if you wish, but I will show you how I make these for my family. First up is ranch mix or ranch seasoning. And perhaps if you're not from my part of the country, kind of the heartland, south, southwest, you might not know what ranch seasoning is or what a big deal ranch is in this part of the country. I mean, ranch dressing is like everywhere. Around here, people don't just put it on salads. They eat their French fries with it. They dip their pizza crust in it. I've even heard of people putting it on their spaghetti. And the dry ranch powder mix is a common ingredient in some of the soups and stews that I make, in casseroles. Of course, you can use these to make dips. And I used to buy this in like a big container. You can get it at Sam's in like a huge container. But I stopped doing that several months ago because I discovered that I can make it using some simple ingredients from home. Now, the one thing you may not already have on hand if you had everything else is the main ingredient, which is powdered buttermilk. Now, I have seen this at Walmart, I've seen it at Target, I've seen it at my local grocery stores. I don't think it's a real specialty ingredient, but if it's not something you've ever heard of, it's not something that you use on a normal basis, it probably isn't in your cabinet. If you're looking for it, I find it in the baking aisle where they keep the other milks like non-fat dry milk and evaporated milk and sweetened condensed milk. It's gonna be kind of around where those are. That's where I typically find it. So to make ranch mix the way that I make it, I start with half a cup of buttermilk powder, and I add to that 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of parsley, 2 teaspoons of dill weed, half a teaspoon of salt, and some fresh cracked black pepper. And yes, I do keep this in an old salsa jar that I cleaned out. I mean, I'm all about trying to limit waste if we can, so what can I say? Waste not, am I right? So once I have all those ingredients in the jar, I will just use a fork to kind of combine all the ingredients. You could do this in a food processor as well if you wanted to be really thorough. And then I do store this as well as the rest of the powdered buttermilk in my refrigerator. I think that it lasts longer, it tastes fresher, and there are directions on the powdered buttermilk container to store it in the refrigerator after it has been opened. As I stated before, I use this seasoning in all kinds of things. I have used it with a little bit of Greek yogurt to make like a dip for vegetables. I use it in soups, I use it in stews. It just comes in handy. It's one of those sort of all-purpose seasonings. We've used it when we grill on pieces of meat. We've sprinkled it on corn on the cob, on baked potatoes. It's something that I pretty much always have on hand because I'll use it probably several times in a week. The next one I'm gonna show you guys is my homemade taco seasoning. seasoning, and this is another staple in our household. I tend to use taco seasoning in a lot of things, obviously to season different meats, if we're gonna have tacos or walking tacos or taco salads, but again, I also use it in soups and stews and in other recipes. So to make my taco seasoning, I start with half a cup of chili powder. And yes, this is gonna make a big batch because like I said, this is something that we tend to use a lot in my house. To the chili powder, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, and 1 tablespoon of oregano. Then I add 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm gonna add a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne. Now this is one of those times when you could change this up to suit your family's tastes. Maybe you like things a little more spicy, so you would add a little bit more cayenne and cumin. Maybe you like it less spicy. I tend to keep it just on the medium side when it comes to spice. My kids do like spicy things, medium salsa as opposed to mild salsa, like that kind of thing. But you could of course change this up according to your tastes. The other thing that I put in my taco seasoning is cornstarch, because I really feel like taco seasonings tend to have a thickening agent, and that can help in the ways that I use the taco seasoning. So I do add about 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch, and then I just, again, use my fork and mix it up. Like I said, you could use the food processor if you wanted to. And then I store this in an airtight container in my cabinet. It does not have to be refrigerated. It's just there in my cabinet whenever we want to use it. With this taco seasoning, how much I use just sort of depends on how I'm using it. If I have a recipe that calls for a packet of taco seasoning, I tend to use 2 to 3 tablespoons of my homemade taco seasoning. If I am flavoring a pound of meat like shredded chicken or ground beef that has been browned, I'll probably just use about 1.5 tablespoons of it. Next is spaghetti sauce mix, and spaghetti is a staple in our household. Now, if you are using like a jar spaghetti sauce, and occasionally I do too, you don't necessarily need a spaghetti sauce mix. But I grew up eating spaghetti in my house made with a pound of ground beef, a can of tomato paste, 1.5 cups of water or so, and then 1 of these spaghetti sauce seasoning packets, which would help season it and thicken the sauce up. I tend to make my spaghetti sauce now using canned tomatoes that I have put in the food processor or tomato sauce, and then I season it myself with this spaghetti seasoning. So I'm starting with 1 tablespoon each of minced onion, garlic powder, oregano, and parsley. You want to use 1 tablespoon of each of those spices. Next, I add 2 teaspoons of basil, 1 teaspoon of thyme, half a teaspoon of salt, some cracked black pepper, and I do use just a pinch of crushed red pepper flake for a little bit of a kick. You could leave that out if you wanted to. And just like the taco seasoning, I really need the spaghetti seasoning to have a thickening agent in it, so I do use 1 tablespoon of cornstarch in this seasoning as well. And then I just mix all of that up, and voila, I have spaghetti seasoning. Now, when I use this seasoning, I tend to use probably 1 to 2 tablespoons of it, depending on the size of the batch of sauce that I'm making. I feel like about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons would be equal to what is in this packet. But again, that would just be according to your preference, how much you would want to use in your sauces. All right, you guys, hopefully that answers some of your questions, and hopefully that gives you some ideas for how to make these seasonings and how to use them. As always, I welcome your kind, polite feedback. Feel free to leave me a comment and let me know how this goes for you if you make these seasonings. And like I said, feel free to make them your own and kind of tweak them if you want to add a little more or a little less of something according to what your taste preferences are. I'll see you guys with another video very soon. Thanks for watching.